All right, welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Bruen, as always, and I'm here with a special guest today, Peter Corbeil, known as, of course, the referee, Peter B. 123. Pete, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Pleasure to have you here. We have a long history together in the New England scene, that is for sure, and it'll be good to catch up and kind of deep dive into some of your professional career, and looking forward to chatting.
Same here. Love talking about the old days.
So, let's start off with, growing up as a kid. When did you first discover pro wrestling? When did you first become a fan?
Oh, geez. I mean, for me, going ever since I can remember, Saturday morning, back in the old days, wrestling was on Saturday mornings. The old WWF when Vince's father owned it. So I grew up watching the Chief Jay Strongbows, the Andre the Giants, all those big guys back then. Yeah. And as a little kid, those big oversized monsters they made that impression on you, Right. So you just wanted to grow up to be like them.
And you mentioned Chief Jay, you mentioned Andre. Who were some of your other personal favorites as a fan?
It's funny because I kind of always gravitated like towards Ivan Putski, because he was only, he was a little short guy, but yet he was still built like so powerful. And being somebody who is shorter in stature myself, that was, like I could look at him and go, that might be achievable. Like obviously I'm never going to be a 6'7" dude. That's out of my control. But, you see somebody like Ivan Putski, you go, that might be within reach.
And, of course, the Polish Power, one of the great stars, the WWF Hall of Famer, and he was just so popular. He had some crazy popularity right up there with Jimmy Snuka and Hulk Hogan and Chief Jay. They were all kind of almost on the same level. Hogan a little bit more, obviously. But in those early days, you can't underestimate the popularity of those individuals for sure.
Absolutely.
So, when it comes to refereeing, you eventually became a professional referee. How did that come about? Is that something you always wanted to do, watching as a fan, or did something click and a certain moment came about where you're like, all right, I'm going to do this?
It's kind of funny. My whole career kind of came about by accident. All right. Even though I was a fan growing up, even when I was in high school, I wasn't into like wrestling as a sport. High school wrestling, of course, very different than what you see on TV. It wasn't until I was actually in my mid-30s. I was working at a flea market one day, and I met this other guy who was set up at the spot next to me, and we just started having a conversation. We kind of hit it off. We're both kind of like really cheap guys, so we decided that we were going to share a space, going forward, right? Save half the rent.
Sure.
And that's how I met the real deal Joel Davis. And it was from hanging out with Joel on the weekends that I actually got introduced to independent pro wrestling.
Wow. Okay.
And when I started, tagging along on the shows with him, it was just like hook, line, and sinker. I had to be a part of it.
And where did you start? Did you have to go to a school with refereeing, or did you just get right into it, or how did it work?
I started off because Joel, Joel was from the Keller Kowalski School.
Yeah.
So Joel brought me up there to meet Walter and talk to Walter about the possibility of in training. Walter told me right up front, as soon as he found out how old I was, he was just like, go home. He's like, somebody your age is not going to take to the training as well as a younger kid. He's like, somebody your age is going to be body shy. And I'm like, well, can I come up here and just, observe and he's like, you come up here all you want, as long as you don't, distract from anything. And so I went up there quite a bit with Joel and just pretty much absorbed like everything I could absorb,
Yeah.
It was a really eye-opening experience because there used to be these TV commercials for E.F. Hutton, which was like an accounting firm. And their commercial was, when E.F. Hutton speaks, everybody listens. And that's what Walter's school was like. So I saw a couple of guys were working on a spot in a ring one day, and they just weren't getting it. So Walter goes over and he's like, let me show you something. And everything in that place stopped. And everybody's attention was on the ring. And Walter showed them what they were doing wrong. And then they proceeded to bang out the spot like 6 times in a row.
Right.
And it was just being in that atmosphere and, observing that. And eventually I did find other, people I could train with. Anthony Ruffo, who you know quite well.
Yeah.
God rest in peace. And a few others, down the Connecticut area. But
that was one of my next questions was Anthony Ruffo.
Yeah.
What are some of your personal memories of Anthony and experiences with him over the years?
When, like I said, Joel was the one who got me into the business, but I didn't want to rely on Joel for all my work, and so Anthony was one of the first promoters that I contacted, like independently on my own.
Sure.
And King Kong Bundy had written a book for people who wanted to become pro wrestlers. And so I followed a lot of the advice in the book. One of his things was to have a physical resume, the 8x10 picture, the resume showing where you would work, who you'd work with, what you've done, So when I set up my first meeting with Anthony, it was at a show, made an appointment to see him, and I walked in and I had my resume, it was like a full package, an envelope. I handed it to Anthony, and Anthony just looked at it, and he looked at me, and then he stood up in the locker room and he goes, I want everybody to see this. And he holds it up. He's like, this is a resume. This is what each and every one of you should have if you want to be a professional wrestler.
Yep.
And so Anthony, liked the way that I did stuff back then. And, we became very good friends. Anthony was one of the best. He's just
Really
a great
was.
person.
Very influential in careers of a lot of New England wrestling talents over the years, and he's certainly missed. Fellow Hall of Famer.
I mean, over the years, there's a lot of good people that I met in the business. Hell, I remember Joe Bruen when he was just a high school kid with a video camera on his shoulder.
Right.
And to see everything that you've grown up and done since then, growing New England Fan Fest to the big deal that it is and everything, it's just a tribute to your love for the sport and the business. And when you contacted me for this, is like anything I can do for Joe Bruen, I'll be there.
Well, I appreciate that, Pete. I really do. So New England Fan Fest, is a great part of it's become a great part of New England history. You have different there's really not much in the New England area for wrestling fan fests. It's a unique situation out this end. Most of them are on the other either the tri-state area or the other side of the US. So I always thought it was a nice opportunity to kind of just give the fans, there's such a rich history in New England. Give the fans something out here to be able to, meet their heroes. And, we always do Q&A sessions and obviously the Hall of Fame ceremony. So something for everybody.
Absolutely.
So interesting fact, last time I interviewed you was almost around this very month, 25 years ago, Pete. 25 years ago, I interviewed you at Primal Conflict Wrestling backstage at the Wonderland Dog Track in Revere, Massachusetts. And
I think I still have that video clip.
Yep. Yeah, it's already been 25 years. Kind of crazy.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun.
Right. So you talked to Anthony, you gave him the resume. What was the very first, was he the first promotion that you worked for, UCW, number one? And the second part of that question, do you remember the very first show in general? Where was it? And do you remember any of the talent you reffed?
The first, Anthony wasn't the first. The first promoter that I worked for as a referee was J.C. Biggs out of Connecticut.
Okay, yeah.
And did a show for him down at, I think it was the Sports Palace, New Britain, Connecticut. And the main event, he had me refereeing the main event, which was King Kong Bundy versus the Metal Maniac. And it was quite the experience.
How was King Kong Bundy to work with?
Phenomenal. I mean, he kind of pulled a rib on me, I think he kind of knew the deal. He knew I was a new guy. So he kind of pulled a rib on me, but yeah, we got through it, and him and I ended up working together a few times over the years. He was a great guy in the locker room.
Yeah.
I had read his book about being a pro wrestler, and the stuff that I learned in there, it doesn't take a lot of effort to act like a professional.
Sure.
And so that was something that I always tried to do, in and out of the ring. Even after the matches were over, I still wouldn't be marking out, still acting, like a pro.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought that made a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
So what year was this that you entered and did that first show?
First show I did was 1997. Yeah.
And when was the first time that you worked for Anthony?
I would say it was probably 99, the first time I worked for Anthony.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
98 or 99.
And at that time, he was running UCW, Unified Championship Wrestling.
Yeah.
He'd often do shows at the Barton Street Community Center.
Did a lot of Barton Street shows.
Yeah, very small venue. Sometimes it would be a small crowd, but they'd always be into it.
Yeah.
And that was on the Pawtucket Central Falls line.
Yeah.
And then they ended up closing that facility and moved just down the street to a new Barton Street Community Center, which was much larger. I do remember that. But it was a unique location. I remember the original Barton Street Community Center. You go downstairs, these long stairs, a super long hallway, and quite a large locker room. I mean, it was huge down there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any personal memories just from that venue in general, or any of the shows that you did out of that venue?
Oh, there's a lot of memories from that place. one night, as you remember, I was large for a referee. I was bigger than most of the wrestlers in the indies. One night they had like a Texas tornado type match with a bunch of, cruiserweights. And for some reason or another, I got to be the referee for that, which in hindsight was probably not the best choice. But at the end of that match, because there's pinfalls all over the place, is just, I was hopping that.
Yeah.
So at the end of the match, I would get downstairs in the locker room. I'm dying. And Anthony just looked at me and he started laughing. He's like, dude, I am so sorry. It never occurred to me, what was going to happen in that match. And I'm like, what's next?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You always stuck with it. And even being a bigger guy, I mean, I didn't often notice any fatigue or anything like that. You were still where you needed to be when you needed to be.
Well, it was like I would be in the locker room after a match, and some of the guys were like, "Dude, like, how do you move like that at your size?" And I was like, "Nobody ever told me I couldn't."
Right.
It's like I have a job to do. You just do it. You don't stop and think about it. Yeah, I'm not supposed to be able to do this. Like when I first started, like the very first time I went down to do a pinfall, it dawned on me that my right leg doesn't bend. Right. So when I would go down, that leg was always, straight out. And so as a result, it always looked like I was diving down into the pinfall. It wasn't. It was more or less because I was falling.
Right.
And then trying to get up was just a whole other, so everything I did was out of necessity, or by accident, and that's just dealing with like the physical limitations that I had, So I never accepted that I can't do this. It's you adapt and overcome.
Right.
This needs to be done. How do I get it done?
Yeah.
And you just do it.
Actually, my first time ring announcing was at the Barton Street Community Center, the first location.
Mm-hmm.
The ring announcer hadn't shown up for the night, and I was there filming for my show. And they said, hey, you want to ring announce tonight? You already do the talking and that,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, man. I mean, it's something I always wanted to do, but I never even thought about trying to do it at that point. And so I went for it. And, of course, the ring announcer that didn't show up was also the sound guy. So there was no microphone. So luckily it was Barton Street, such a small place. You can kind of go yourself out. And, but yeah, I remember that fondly, doing that. And then Anthony thought I did a great job and started doing a couple other things with him. And then all of a sudden started branching out and going to all different promotions around New England. And for a while there, I was working every weekend, every, Saturday, Sunday, sometimes Friday, and just, great experience.
Well, there were plenty of federations to work.
Right.
And, the thing for me, because at the time my kids were little, and so it was a great way for me to, bring them along to the shows. They were having a ball watching.
Yeah.
My wife would be working the souvenir table. So for us, it was a real, it was a family activity.
Everybody was involved.
Yeah, and it just so many great times. I remember, I stopped refereeing eventually just because I just couldn't do the up and down anymore. Physically the body just couldn't take it. So I got into, I asked Anthony, I'm like, can I transition into becoming a manager? And he's like, well, you already have so many guys. It's like, I understand that. I said, but my refereeing days are rapidly coming to a close. I said, and I want to be still be a part of it. So it's like, well, let's see what you can come up with for a character. If you can come up with a gimmick that, works, then by all means. And that eventually led into the Steakdaddy thing. But my family, it was funny because one day I was one of the early matches as Steakdaddy. I was refereeing a tag team match against Dan Bedondi and whoever his partner was at the time. And I used a cane as part of my gimmick. And Dan Bedondi's in the corner, and I'm working him over in the ribs with the cane, and I'm choking him from outside the ring. And Dan actually got a little upset at me because I was being stiff.
Yeah.
He got out of the ring and started chasing me. And I'm running around the corner where my kids were sitting, and my kids are absolutely purple with laughter. And, at the end of the night, I get in the car and I turn around. I'm like, you little bastards. This guy's chasing me with my own cane trying to kill me. And you're laughing. And they're like, Dad, we never seen you run before. It's like, yeah, well, Dad's running days are over,
Right.
Unless I got a big guy chasing me that's trying to kill me.
So for the fans that aren't familiar, what was the Steakdaddy gimmick? Why don't you kind of talk about how you came up with it and what it was all about?
Yeah, well, like I said at the time, the refereeing was just becoming, physically too much. Yeah. And so I wanted to be a part of it. The first time I went out, I didn't have any idea of what I wanted the character to be. So I just kind of went out there blind, like a generic, manager type, valet type. And just kind of like interacting a little as what I did with the crowd that night. It kind of like, wait a minute, I got an idea where I want to take this. Yeah. And Attleboro, the show we did that night was in Attleboro at the Moose Lodge. Attleboro is very much like a mill town, a factory, place, blue collar attitude. And so there's a tendency to have a resentment towards rich people. And so I decided that I was going to take this character, Steakdaddy, who I didn't even have a name for at the time, but I was going to make this character who's going to be, the fancy suit, the gold jewelry, just the obnoxiously rich looking dude.
Yeah.
The stuck up, arrogant attitude. And that's what I was going to go with. And I started acquiring, some of the jewelry, piece by piece. I came across the Zoot suit, and that launched it into a whole new stratosphere. Yeah. When I first showed Anthony the Zoot suit, just like the smile on his face is like, now that's a gimmick.
Right. And you mentioned Attleboro, Massachusetts, the Moose Lodge there. That was actually one of my favorite venues to ring announce. It wasn't a big place, but the crowd was always packed in there. Yeah, they would pack them in, and they'd be standing room only sometimes, and they would just be so lively and so into the show. Yeah. And I always remember that, for that location.
Oh, well, I mean, I was born and raised in Attleboro, so this is my hometown. And it would be funny, like, you would do the show, on a Saturday night or whatever, and then it's like the following Tuesday, I'd be at the grocery store and Steakdaddy,
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, it was people in Attleboro. Yeah, we did shows like at the Pine Street Armory. People in Attleboro love the pro wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Armory in Attleboro. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so I remember UCW went there in 1999.
Yep.
Were you a part of that show?
Yes.
Okay, so I was there. That's when I think Primal Conflict was in the crowd. It was kind of like a takeover promo where they were kind of trying to invade the show. And
Right.
I remember Gino Martino was doing some strongman stuff going on in the corner over there.
Yeah.
And that was a cool venue, and they got hundreds of fans for that show. I
Oh
think,
yeah.
if I remember correctly, it was like 300 or 400 people at that show.
Yeah.
That was a big one. Any memories from that show in particular?
Well, there was like the local newspaper actually did some press coverage of that and everything. So there was several pictures in the Sun Chronicle, that I was in a few of them. And as a matter of fact, the Sun ran a picture on the front page of the paper in color. It was Vertebraker and Dr. Heresy with me as a referee in the ring. That was like a front page of the Sun Chronicle. I'm like, whoa, look at that.
That's awesome.
And
do you still keep in touch with any of the people from back then?
Oh, I mean, you go back, one of my favorite guys always in the business has been TJ Richter.
Yeah.
All the locker rooms that, I shared. I just always loved his attitude, his love, his dedication for it all, and, Vertebraker was another guy who I admired, Vertebraker, would ask me sometimes, would you be willing to do this for you? And like, dude, for you, I would do anything in the ring. Because he was just that kind of a guy. I like we're like working with his mom, Sandy. She was quite the character.
Yeah.
So and of course, I have guys that I have like, sentimental memories about, like Derek Destiny.
Oh yeah.
Was, always, he was one of those guys who would always go out and give 110%, no matter what. And he could work a crowd like nobody's business.
He could.
Like he was not a big guy, but he was a great heel. He could just get heat like nobody's business. And
for a while there, he was old school Derek Destiny.
Old school, yep.
At one point, he was schoolboy.
We did a match. I believe it was in Pawtucket. Might have been like a middle school, in a field at this middle school. And it was a tag match. And Derek was absolutely driving me crazy because he was just like, he refused to stay in the ring. He would like come in and then he'd get right out. And I'm like, dude, and I actually started getting frustrated with him. I knew he was just, getting heat, but I was starting to get pissed. And it ended up that I actually ended up picking him up and body slamming him.
Oh, wow.
Right. And the crowd started chanting Peter B. And I think it was Shane Simons who was in the match. And he's like, do it again. So I picked up Derek again and body slammed him a second time. And the crowd was going crazy. And Sandy's screaming, you can't do that. I'm like, why?
So was that PLW, Power League?
That was, I think that might have been a Power League show.
Yeah, because you mentioned Shane Simons. He was a mainstay there.
Yeah. Yeah, that was just, you don't see referees body slamming wrestlers too often.
No.
So that was, that was definitely one of my personal favorites. My
Any
kid,
memories?
still talks about that. My kid talks about body slamming Derek Destiny. I did a show in Connecticut one time where it was at this college, huge auditorium. It seemed like it took forever just to walk from the locker room out to the ring, right? And I'm standing in the ring waiting for the wrestlers to come in. And all of a sudden, I see like peripheral vision, something flying into the ring. And I look, and it was like an orange. Somebody had hucked an orange. And I caught it. And and people were actually reacting to the fact that I caught the orange. Yeah. So I just started peeling it. And then it was like, my kid was sitting there down ringside, so I threw him the orange. And it's like my kid still loves the fact that he's like, Dad, I don't even know how you saw that thing. It was just like flying through the air.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, just, peripheral vision,
Yeah.
Just reflex. And then, of course, I think the first time that I got head butted in the nuts by a midget, my kid remembers that one.
And who was that?
Tiny the Terrible.
Tiny the Terrible, absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Now, do you have any memories of the Extreme Strongman, Gino Martino?
Oh, Gino? Absolutely. As a matter, you mentioned the Pine Street Armory show. One of the things Gino did, he did like the bed of nails.
Yeah.
And he had a piece of plywood, and he had like 6 or 8 of us from the locker room, big guys, all sitting on the plywood. I was one of the guys that was sitting on the plywood with him.
And that was also Barbie Behemoth, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah. He was an interesting character, huh?
Yeah, he was like from the tri-state area.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was interesting character. Won't go too far into that one. Yeah. My mother always said, if you can't say anything good about somebody, don't say anything. So, yeah.
Right. What are some of your other favorite venues throughout your career? Anything else stand out?
Well, Barton Street was definitely a sentimental favorite. I did like the Moose Lodge just because the crowd was always so intense there. Yeah. Another place that I liked but had a terrible history was the American Legion Hall in Taunton.
Oh, yeah.
It was good building to do shows in, but a lot of tragic things happened in that building. I don't even think they run shows there anymore.
No. Yeah, that was that's unfortunately some, like you said, some pretty terrible things happened there.
Yeah. There were, the New Britain Sports Palace in Connecticut, in New Britain. That was a great venue for doing shows. Wild crowds there. Right. It was like a college town, so you had very rowdy crowds. There were places, I remember we did a show at Franklin, at Dean College in Franklin.
Oh, yeah.
And they actually had like a balcony. And I remember some of the wrestlers going, can we do a spot from that balcony? And it was like, I don't think can is the question. I think should is the question.
Yeah.
Right. It's like that's and I think the management of the building ended up, facilities managers like, nah, can't do that. So
that was a beautiful place. Great venue for a wrestling show. Unique, obviously, but great locker room. There's multiple locker rooms and just a cool atmosphere for sure. That was IIW, International Independent Wrestling.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember we did a show up at the End Zone in Foxborough.
Oh yeah.
Terrible locker room there.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a locker room. It was part of the kitchen area, and it was just like cramped and terrible. And but that was all part of it. I remember we did a show at a rod and gun club out there in Rhode Island somewhere, out in the woods. And it's like the locker room, of course, wasn't even a locker room. It was just like a circle of cars,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I remember the End Zone. I ring announced a show there, and there were 2 people in the audience.
Yeah.
2 people at that particular show. I don't know if you did that one, but that was rough. So it was more just a training show. The guys were just having fun and goofing around, and yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, some shows we were the crowd. You know?
Right.
And, you know, I spent a lot of years in the music business. It was the same kind of thing. There are some nights where you're just playing to the bartender.
Yeah. And you mentioned your YouTube page. You did that for a while, where you were, covering different, music and all sorts of things with that. Why don't you talk about that? How that started, and do you still do that?
No, I actually just quit YouTube a few months ago. I got into YouTube 6 years ago, 2018, 2019. I had a stroke in 2018, October 2018, which totally destroyed me. Like I couldn't talk, I couldn't do anything. Took me 8 months of speech therapy just to learn how to talk again. And so I started doing YouTube as a way to practice my speech therapy. I figured that, like I lived alone, so I didn't have somebody that I could like talk to all the time. So I figured, well, I'll talk to a camera. And that way I can at least watch, like the mechanics of my mouth, what I'm doing. That way I can relate to what my speech therapist is telling me. And so that's how I originally started. I would do like music video reactions.
Right.
Because I knew music from being a musician all the years that I was. So that's what I did. And the channel did really well, as my, speech got better and better. I got into more stuff on YouTube. And over the years, the channel shifted focus from this, that, the other thing. But eventually I just got to the point where I got sick of it. One day I went to make a video and I contacted a friend of mine and I said, I don't think I want to make videos anymore. And she's like, why? I said, I think I've run out of things to say. Just I have no desire to keep repeating the same talking points over and over.
Yeah.
Said, I think I'm done.
What are your memories of the man who, bigger is better, Mr. Biggs?
He was Mr. Biggs. I didn't really work a lot with him. Worked a few shows, but not many. So I don't know. Like, I don't even think him and I worked in the ring. We did shows together, but I don't even think I actually even like worked a match with him.
Sure. Wow.
But I mean, big guy. He was always a big presence in the locker room.
Yeah.
Young guy, deceptively young.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, him and I didn't have a lot in common other than the fact that we're both, physically big guys, but he was even a lot bigger than me.
Yeah.
So.
Now, there was a lot of animosity, so it seemed, back then between some of the promotions. It was kind of frowned upon to work for different promotions. It was taken very seriously back then, and certain promoters didn't want you doing different gigs. You had to stick with, this promotion or that promotion. That's definitely changed over the years now, where, you see indie talents working all over the different platforms. What's your take on that and how it's kind of fluctuated over the years from being so strict to where we are now?
Well, I kind of ran into that issue myself. Like I said, when I got into the business, because Joel brought me into the business. Now Joel did almost exclusively work with like the NWA, NWA Boston or NWA New England, or groups, at that level.
Yeah.
I did some work with them after Tony Rumble passed away. So when Jason Rumble kind of took the show over, I worked for Jason for a little bit. But I could see that there were groups, where we don't want to work for, we don't want people who work for this group, basically because of the level of training.
Sure.
It's like, oh, this federation, none of their guys have any real training. So we don't want anybody that's been working there. And I'm like, well, everybody, you have to judge people on what they individually have done.
Yeah.
Because even the best schools have bad students that have come out of there, So you can't say because this person went to this school that they're good, and because a person went to this school or that they're terrible. No, you got to judge each person on their own merit.
Yeah, everybody's different.
Yeah. And so I did see that a lot in the early days, where there was a lot of, you don't want to work here because of this. And it's like, dude, if they're putting on a good show, I want to work for them,
Exactly.
And it's how does the audience react? At the end of the day, it's all about the audience.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care which of the wrestlers does the most spectacular high spot, or, did the crowd react?
Right.
Because if the crowd isn't reacting, nothing you do makes it matters.
Yeah.
So do you get a crowd in? Do people come to the shows to watch the action? That's the important stuff. Everything else is just, it's not that important.
Sure. And I used to do the spot shows at the American Legion in Seekonk, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
The HWF started off as the Hardcore Wrestling Federation, kind of transitioned it into the Heatwave Wrestling Federation.
Yeah.
A little more family friendly on the posters. And
I love doing those shows.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. What are some of your memories of kind of doing those? They were kind of neat because it wasn't your average crew all the time. You get different talents from all over.
I love doing the barbed wire thumbtack matches.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I remember we were set up there at Seekonk one night, and the main event was a barbed wire match. And the wife had the souvenir stand that was set up next to the bar. The bartender that night, not realizing that the wife was the wife, was talking to her. And he was like, "Oh, this is all fake. Those barbed wire is all rubber and the thumbtacks are all fake." And she goes, "Oh, really?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah. I've seen dozens of these shows." And she's like, "Oh, it's interesting." So as I was on my way down to the ring, she looks at me and she kind of signals to the bartender and goes, like, not a believer. So after the match, I went up to the bar and I said, "Can you give me a couple of napkins?" He's like, "Sure." And he takes a napkin, and I opened my hand and I got thumbtacks from doing the pinfalls. And I started pulling the thumbtacks out of my hand. I'm putting them down, and he looks, he goes, "Those are real thumbtacks." And I said, "Of course they are. What do you think? We use rubber?" And I start wiping the blood off my hand, and then as soon as I wipe it, it comes, starts back again. He goes, "That's real blood." And I'm like, "Dude, we're people. We bleed." And it's like, well, I thought, wow. I said, I worked in a promotion once where a guy used fake blood. I said they ended up breaking his legs in the parking lot after the match. I said, "You don't do that. It's we're fake blood, no."
And some of your fellow referees in the New England scene during that era, Slick Willie Jackson, there was Mickey Lee, a whole bunch of different referees at that time. Any interactions with them over the years outside of the ring, or any personal memories?
No. I always liked Slick Willie. I always had a big smile on his face. Mickey Lee was a fun guy to be around.
Yeah.
He was like a guy that he was like just happy to be there.
Yeah.
Whatever you ask him, Mickey, we need to, some of the younger referees that I met at the time, yeah, you could see an attitude problem coming up,
Sure.
and it is, you got to have the right attitude as a ref.
Yeah.
You have to know why you're there and why you're not. So when you first notified me I was going to be inducted into the New England Pro Hall of Fame, I'm like, why? Nobody ever bought a ticket to come see me. My name was never on the billboard. So.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we like to recognize all different aspects of the business. So behind the scenes, ring announcers, referees, it's not just about the in-ring, wrestlers. So I think it's very important that everybody on every level should be recognized for sure.
Yeah, and that was, like in my wildest dreams, I never pictured anything like that. But the fact that, a bunch of guys that I respected, could show me a level of that back was just the coolest thing in the world.
And going back to that was 2013 in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, for the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. It was at the Seaport Inn and Marina Hotel. What are your memories specifically, from that night and kind of leading up to it, and maybe some of your dealings with talent conversations or anything?
I was sick as a dog for like 3-4 days before that. I wasn't even sure that I was going to make it, but it's like, come hell or high water, I got to make it. I got to be there for that. As a matter of fact, when I, even now when I look at, because I still have the DVD from it, and I watch that, my acceptance speech was so low key and just like so mellow because I was just dead, and like I had Joel did my introduction and he was like, great hype man, Peter B, and then it's like, I go, yeah, thank you. And, I watched that, and at least I got to, say thank you to the people that I worked with all that time, the guys that I laughed with them. There were nights that we cried. I was there the night Chief Dave Fox passed away. And I mean, these you just over the years, there's just a bond that you develop with these guys. I haven't seen a lot of these guys, in 10, 15 years. But it's like if I ran into them on the street, it would be just like, we saw each other yesterday.
Yeah.
There's, it's a bond. It really is. It's a bond that you share with these guys because of what you go through together.
Right. And what is your advice for somebody that's looking to get into the business now, whether it be in-ring competition or referee or any capacity?
Yeah. Keep the ego in check. Everybody, and this is true for any type of creative outlet, musician, athlete, whatever. You always want to be the best that you can be. But you have to accept the fact that you have a role in what is going on.
Yeah.
And that you are not the star all the time.
Right.
So always have the good attitude. Always be a professional. Always act like a professional. And just remember that the people that you run into when you're climbing the ladder are the same people that you're going to run into when you're falling back down that ladder. Yeah. So treat everybody as well as you can treat them, because you never know when they're the person that you're going to need, to help you out.
We recently lost Robbie Ellis. Any memories of Robbie Ellis?
Robbie, the Sports Illustrated legend. Robbie was always a fun guy to be around. God, he seemed like he was in the business forever.
Yeah.
He, in wrestling is a business about hype. And so here was a guy who, wrestling was definitely like a side biz for him. It was a side gig. But because of the notoriety he got with the Sports Illustrated article, he was able to parlay that into a whole wrestling persona.
Sure.
The Sports Illustrated legend, the hype of everything, and that's what wrestling is. You take a kernel of truth and you blow it up. It's like, for instance, back in like 1984, I went into a recording studio, recorded a couple of original songs for 45, if you remember what those were.
Yep.
And I never really did anything with it. But like 2009, I decided to upload the digital form of it onto iTunes, just for shits and giggles. And it actually ended up, selling a few copies like internationally. Like it sold on like 4 continents. So I'm able to tell people, yes, I am an internationally selling recording artist.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Now I don't have any gold records or platinum records. As a matter of fact, I say my records went like gum wrapper foil. But, but I did it,
Yeah.
So you take a kernel of truth and you blow it up into something bigger. And
Sure.
That's what wrestling is all about, hype.
Now, you mentioned some of the promotions you worked for in New England, UCW, of course, the HWF. IIW, Power League Wrestling. Any other promotions that we haven't touched on that you've worked in over the years?
Well, I worked for NEPW. I worked for Green Mountain Wrestling in Vermont. NWA New England. I did actual shows for the AWA. Oh, yeah. There was a brief resurrection of it. As a matter of fact, I did a show in Brooklyn, New York with The Rock. So that was a fun time. So I mean, yeah, I worked for a lot of feds, especially in this area.
Yeah.
But Green Mountain was my first experience with Green Mountain. Was Joel Davis had actually called me. His ride to the show in Newport, Vermont had fallen through, and he wanted to know if I could give him a ride up there. So that was like my first experience, was doing I picked him up. It was him and, what was his name? Moose. No, not Moose. Bull Montana.
Oh, yes.
Right. So it was him and Bull Montana. Picked them up in Salisbury Beach. They had done a show for NWA. And then they were traveling up to Newport, Vermont. So I drove them up there. And we get there, and I ended up working the merch table for the promoter.
Oh.
Right. And that was like my first experience in the business. And that was like, I got to meet the guys, some of the guys and stuff like that. It's like I just fell in love with the whole atmosphere of it all,
Yeah.
It's like I called my wife from the hotel. I'm like, I got to do this. I got to get into this,
Right.
And it's like, Joel, how do I get into this? Oh, you got to go to school, and that's how that all started.
Anything that stands out, most memorable fan interaction, whether good or bad?
Oh, I mean, it's all about the fans, right?
Yeah.
I did a show up in Green Mountain, as a matter of fact. I eventually did start working there as a referee. And there was a show where Joel actually hit me with a pair of brass knuckles.
Oh, man.
Right, laid me out. Which to this day is probably one of the best looking bumps I ever took on film. It was awesome spot for the video. But after the show, I get in my car and traveling home with my wife. And we get off the highway at some point, went to get something to eat. And I'm sitting in the restaurant. And my wife says, those guys over there keep looking at you. And I'm like, So finally I look over and I wave, and one of them comes over. He's like, did I just see you in the show up in Newport where a guy hit with a brass? I went, yeah. He goes, dude, are you all right? And I showed him. I got potated pretty good. But... Yeah, it's always fun to run into somebody who was at the show, just to get like their reaction outside of it,
Sure. Now, if you could pick one favorite match that you've refereed from your whole career, just one, what would it be?
Wow. I would say there was a show in Braintree where I was managing Widowmaker, Eric, I forget his last name.
It was Eric Storm and then Eric Bart.
Eric Storm, right. And his partner at the time for that show, God, I forget. Too many concussions. But it was against Joel Davis and Dan Badondi. And it was for the belt. I think it might have been Donnie Rotten, might have been the other partner.
Oh yeah.
And we cheated and did everything we could. That was, so at the end of the match, my tag team and I were coming out with the belts. And it was a fun match, just having those four guys in the ring together and everything I was doing outside the ring to cheat and everything. And the crowd was just phenomenal. But as we're coming back to the locker room, there was a drunk dude in the crowd. There's always one. And he's like, I'm going to take your cane and shove it up your... And I just stopped and I looked at him and I held the cane out. Like, here you go. Go for it.
Right. Wasn't expecting that, I bet.
And he just like sat down because, I mean, I got this tag team, right?
Right.
And so I go back and again, at the end of the night, I get in the car with my kids and my kids are like, Dad, that guy was really pissed. What are you going to do? I said, what's he going to do? I got the tag team champions with me. He ain't going to mess with me.
Yep.
That's
a good memory. A lot of memories, from the New England scene over the years.
Absolutely.
And, in closing, how do you want to be remembered? What do you want your legacy to be?
Hey, when I gave my acceptance speech at the Hall of Fame, I quoted Johnny Justice. And Johnny Justice, I think summed it up. He said, nobody does it like B2B. My style, wrestling is a copycat business. Everybody is copying somebody else. The moves get copied, you just call it something different, or it's a version of something, right? It's a copycat business. And I just tried to be me. The things I did, I watched other referees. I watched the pro guys. I watched the WWE guys, the WCW guys, and you learn things from watching them. Well, when it came time for me to do the job, I just did it the way I did it.
Yeah.
And I think it's just important to try to be as original as you can, and to be true to yourself.
Yeah.
If you go out there and try to create a persona that's not you, it's eventually, it's going to unravel.
Right.
So you just got to be true to yourself, because if you go out there and be you, you can't screw that up.
Exactly. Well, Pete, thanks so much for joining us here today. It's been great catching up and hearing a lot of the old stories. New England wrestling is always going to be a piece of me as well. So it's great to go back and look at things like that. And, for Joseph Bruen, for Peter B., Pete Corbeil, it's been the All Access Entertainment Podcast, and we will see you next time.
Take care.